have eaten.
Just I give rather little.
No,
Good evening, friends. Good evening, industry, technical textiles, and the medical protective wear. May I request all the attendants, all the attendees to put in the chat box from which city you're coming from, which company, and what's your name. It will be nice to know from where all the audience is coming from, just to understand and just to say hello to each other. Hi, Bhavik from Mumbai, Mr. Naik from Goa, Kanan Loyal Textiles, thank you. Mr. Patil from Wuhan Textiles, wow. Bhute from Wellspin. Nikshita from Alok Industries. Mishika, welcome, welcome, wow. From Navi Mumbai, from Reliance, from Mangalore. Texperts. From Rajasthan. Sushant from Birla Century. Mr. Matre from Ichal Karanji. Nihar from Pacific Harish. Dashrath from Rajasthan. Vikas Sharma from AT. Good evening. Happy to see you here. Mr. Jariwala from AT. Mr. Mathur, DSM. I think we should wait for 2-3 minutes more before we begin. Mr. Roy from Arvind Limited. Hello, Mr. Sharan. Rajkumar from Eurofins. Hello, Mr. Mistry. Mr. Chaudhary, Hometex, Thane. Brajesh Patel from Epson, India. Shribhash Pandey from Surat. Interesting, Mr. So many people. I think it's just pouring in. We should wait for others also to join in. Robert from Pyrotex, Germany. Nirav Shah, Diagonal Consulting. Mr. Nanavati Amba Projects, UK. Anil Wali from Reliance. Good evening, welcome. Mr. Garg from Reliance. Mr. Gupta from Belgium, GBS Belgium. Siddhartha from Taft, Thailand. Vincent Paul, Intex Consulting, Germany. Mr. Israni, Reliance Industries. Good day to all of you and welcome to the webinar co-organized by Textile India and Indian Technical Textile Association, ITA, on the topic of protective medical wear. The question is India export ready for medical protective wear? I'm Priyanka Pawar, Group Exhibition Head responsible for the textile shows in Messe Frankfurt and your host for this webinar. Thank you for joining us today for the session. As COVID-19 pandemic ravaged even the most developed countries of the world, India has shown its superior leadership, solidarity, and its mind for innovation and quick thinking by achieving an unrealistic goal of producing 4.5 lakh PPE kits within 3 months of virus outbreak. This just exemplifies India's abilities, resources, and commitment to its people. Earlier, like just 3 months ago, there was no domestic manufacturing of PPE in the country, and almost all of them were imported. While today we are ready to become a 7,000 crore industry in India. Yet again, India has proved to be a leader. In the true sense, rather, the Atmanirbhar Hindustan or Atmanirbhar Bharat. And today, what follows is a remarkable journey of collaboration between government, central and state, industries, workers to revamp the existing production line to manufacture a completely unknown product from scratch. Imagine from zero to produce 4.5 lakh PPE kits every single day. In 60 days, India witnessed 56 times growth, and that's really incredible. But before we begin, a special thank you to ITA and Textile Magazine for their support in making this endeavor successful. At present, I can proudly say that we have over 1,400 registrations and are live on TechTextile India Facebook page and Textile Magazine social media pages, therefore reaching out to an audience of more than 20,000. Today's panelists are experts from the industry, and we have with us Dr. Anup Rakshit. He's the Executive Director, Indian Technical Textile Association. Dr. Sundar Raman, Managing Director, Shiva Texians, and the first man to move towards manufacturing of PPE coveralls. Mr. Mahesh Kudav, Managing Director, Venus Safety. He's the architect behind N95 mask and the biggest manufacturer in Asia. Mr. Narendra Thapa, Vice President from Arvind Mills. Mr. Pavan Kapoor, Managing Director, IIGM. He represents the world's leading companies in the manufacturing sector. Mr. Ashit Kundra, Managing Director, Eurofins, and Mr. Subodip Mukherjee, General Manager, TUV South Asia. I would first like to introduce our partners, Dr. Rakshit. And my first question to you is, how is technical textile industry achieved from zero to 4.5 lakh PPE coverall and mask production? Can you please share the overview of the industry with the audience, please?
Thank you, Priyanka, and good afternoon to everybody. And thanks all of you to share investing your time to listen to us. Now, this journey from the month of March 2020 till date is not a very smooth journey, but we could achieve something like, I would not say zero, it was something like a couple of thousand coveralls and the masks, from where actually we have now reached to around 20 lakh meters of fabric production, which really converts to about 4 to 5 lakhs of 4.5 lakhs of coverall fabric. Similarly, almost a similar quantity of face mask. Face mask of two types. One is that 3-ply mask, another is the N95, which is a high-end mask. Now we are the second largest PPE kit producer in the world. Now how this was possible with a short period of only some 3 months, that I want to just give a little glimpse of the journey, how it happened. Now basically, our fabric, when this came up, these fabric producers were hardly there, were 5 or 6. Now within 15-20 days, because our industry took a lot of initiative and then developed the product which are suitable for making the PPE cloth, whatever the standard is laid down by the Ministry of Textile and Ministry of Health, means accepted by the Ministry of Health. At this point of time, just want to mention that this is not all the ideal PPE products which we are making now, but because of the emergency situation, it was at the level of the very senior doctors in Ministry of Health. This has been accepted, and to fight with this emergency situation, it started. Now the problem was, after the lockdown, there was a lot of coordination was required from the government side. That means it is in the central government and it is in the state government as well. Because during lockdown, this was coming under essential commodity item, the mask and the coverall. But there were a lot of problems of the transportation of material, creating that supply chain, or connecting the supply chain, I would say. Then there are a lot of material was to be transported from the various parts of the India to the various other parts of the India. That means there was a movement not only within the state, but the interstate. So here I would like to thank the Ministry of Textiles and also the Office of the Textile Commissioners. And Textile Commissioner's Office has got a lot of regional offices across India. They really helped us, and the coordination from the association, from the manufacturers, and along with the government, because they had to take up with various other departments of the government to make it happen. So this is how the entire supply chain link was established, and gradually this production of these coverall and the mask started increasing and escalating the curve. And now the problem was about the testing of these products in the fabric form as well as in the garment form. Only Citra was there because they were the center of excellence on medical textiles. They had this facility, but we really then tried to pursue with the various other laboratories available all across the India, because the Citra was only located at the southern tip, at the Coimbatore, southern tip of India. So it was very difficult for the northern people to send over there. Courier services were not available. So many hurdles we had. But then gradually, within about a month or so, we got at least 8 laboratories like DRDO, then the other ordnance factories, laboratories. They have actually come up, they have opened up their services, and we could then get our industry people could get their products tested. That is how this journey, within the month of only about 3 months or so, we could achieve this really a mind-boggling figure of 4.5 lakhs of PPE coveralls and the masks. Thank you.
So Dr. Rakshit, do you think we are export ready now? I mean, do you think India can start exporting? What's your view on that?
In only one word, no.
Why?
Yes, because as I mentioned when I was talking, that the products which we are making now is a compromised product. These fabrics are not having the breathability. It doesn't have the antimicrobial resistance, antiviral resistance. So this was quickly done to take care of this emergency situation knowingly. So if we want to go for the export, there are a number of things have to be addressed. Now, couple of points I would like to mention, which in short, then maybe we can deal in more details later on. Number one is the right product which is required in these Western countries or the Eastern countries. That has to be understood, because these specifications are different than what we are following now in India. Number two is there are sort of certification procedure. One certification is in-house certification like quality management system. If you want to really export, you need to have a proper quality management systems, as many people are aware of ISO 9001. Similarly, there is ISO standard for medical devices, which they have to implement in their factory. Number three is that they have to understand what are the requirements, what are the specifications of that particular country and that particular buyer which they are catering to. Then number four is in many countries, for example, in Europe and also USA, you need certain certification. In Europe, for example, you need CE certification. Similarly, in Europe, in USA, you need NIOSH certification and some other CE and other certifications in Europe as well. So these are the things one has to first do, develop the product as per the international specification, do the homework that these these products are qualifying or passing the tests required by these international standards, then they should apply for these type of certification. Otherwise, these certifications are very expensive. Unless we do the proper homework, develop the product in the fabric stage, in the coverall stage, in the mask stage, everywhere. Otherwise, you are going to fail. So this is, in short, a flavor of the readiness of this thing. Now, I just want to have these. I said no in the beginning. Why I said no? Because there is a huge opportunity, and there are only couple of manufacturers in the fabric and the coverall and mask stage who are ready for export. But the number of people, maybe about 10 to 15 people, the companies are ready for export, but they have to do some further work to qualify, to go there, certification, all these things. So these are required for the first stage, and then we can grow the market. And this is an opportune time for our Indian technical textile industry, because there is a lot of the vacuum taking place from the China. So to grab the market of wherever the Chinese people were selling, and there we should have that edge on the quality first, and then we should penetrate, understand, and penetrate into these markets. Thank you.
So Dr. Rakshit, what I understand is it is not the survival of the fittest of the companies who are manufacturing, but it is survival of the cooperation. I think the whole industry has to come together, cooperate together, and see how we can go out for exports immediately.
That's correct. That's correct. Yes.
Right. Before we begin, I want to take two polls also to understand what are the demographics of the people who are joining us today. We start with the first poll question. What industry do you belong to? Technical textiles, apparel, home textiles, or you're not from the textile industry and you want to get in here? So we really are curious to understand, because their panelists can then accordingly address their topics and discussions accordingly. Oh, so 46% is technical textiles. We've got 28 from apparel, home textiles, and also non-textiles. Okay, so now before we begin, okay, for the second one, I'm just requesting all of you all to put in your question answers in the Q&A box, and the chat can happen in the chat box. So your specific questions can be answered after the session is over. Over to the second poll. If from the technical textile industry, since how long have you been in this business? Over 5 years, or just started after pandemic, or are you planning to do this in your future? Okay, again, 47% from technical textiles, 18% have just started after pandemic, and amazing response is 35% who are trying to venture into this business. I think we are in the right place. You're getting the right kind of guidance from all the great panelists here. Over to the next question, and I'm heading to Mr. Kudav, Mr. Mahesh Kudav. In the N95 category, you are the man, right? Please share your success story with the N95 mask pre and post COVID. How did the company try to fulfill the sudden demand? How are you able to succeed in this?
Well, thank you, Priyanka. We are in this respiratory protection devices since last about 32 years. And we have been active exporters for last 20 years. We have several approvals from across the world, from various countries. So that gave us a very early insight of the quality expectations of an N95 respirator. And we realized definitely during this journey that somewhere around the path that we are going, there is a risk for the whole global community on a pandemic situation that's going to happen. Because particularly in the respiratory protection, a pandemic situation talk has been happening last 10 years. And in the recent past, people thought, okay, people are just talking about it. It's not likely to happen at that scale as what even SARS we experienced. And in fact, some countries who were doing stockpiling decided that they will not stockpile anymore. So in this thing, what happened was that our majority of our success for respiratory products happened overseas. And the domestic market continued to increase, but the major markets were from overseas. So that's how pre-COVID our success was, that we were focused on exports. We were focused on getting approvals from all major countries who are buying masks from across the world. And we are trying to beat them, particularly the Chinese manufacturers, on cost, on quality, or the European manufacturers on innovativeness. So that kept us our flag flying in the pre-COVID. Post January 13th, the government stopped the exports. And we initially took it as a setback because we realized that our export business, which was our major business, has now no opportunity. And for almost until the whole of February, we had actually no orders from the government because government started placing orders only in the month of March. So we were fighting with the government, or rather pleading with the government, impressing them that our business is exports, and without any orders, we would really have crisis at our end. And at the same time, the government was not sure which way the pandemic attack would go. So although they were telling us that something is happening wrong and we require to prepare ourselves, but no one in the government was also aware that the extent of pandemic attack would be so much all over the world and globally. And only when things tried to go about, we realized what's going to happen. So post-COVID, what we did was that as we had 1 month advance lead that the pandemic is going to attack and government is preparing. So we had little analysis of the situation, that if the pandemic situation worsens, what's likely to happen? And if it mitigates, then what we will have to do to overcome the 1 month loss of exports. So mentally, our industry was a little bit prepared for this calamity. Post-COVID, to get into a scenario where we would have to escalate our supplies, we fortunately had a lot of stocks with us of raw materials. One of the critical materials required for manufacturing this mask is melt-blown fabrics. And pre-COVID, we were not having any major manufacturer of melt-blown producers in our country. And we had the stock, so we could quickly increase our production. More so ever in the month of February, our production was also gearing up. We thought that since there is a break, let us update ourselves. So with the result, when the orders started coming in March, we were actually prepared for those kind of orders. So one of the things I would say that we were very focused on respiratory products. We knew that that is what we want to do and become a producer, national as well as global. So that helped us to quickly supply what the government wanted. I should give credit to the government post-COVID and just before COVID. They had made their things very clear. They had done their homework very clear. They had approached us to find out how many months we would survive if the transport or the logistics system stops all over the world. What would be the alternatives? Who are our critical suppliers? So as soon as lockdown was there, we had some nodal officers working within our premises. And these nodal officers actually did a very good job of from the textile ministry, of course. So the nodal officers kept all our suppliers, they kept all our team working, and they didn't allow anything to shut down. So the presence of these nodal officers also raised the confidence for my employees in the factory. And we took several measures for our employees, which I'll discuss later on. So we found that our team really, they stood up and took the challenge. Another reason I think that we succeeded post-COVID is that there is always, you say, during adversity, you get the best out of yourself. So fortunately, we found that we were importing a lot of raw materials, some machine parts, we were importing some accessories from various countries in the world. China, Taiwan, Korea, US. And every week we started finding that now Korea has stopped supplying, now Taiwan has stopped supplying, now nothing is coming out of China. So in this adversity, our suppliers actually raised their bar a lot. And that actually made me realize that people within our country can be very innovative. And today we have found that almost solutions for all our materials, whether it is melt blown, whether it is some kind of specialized machine parts, or it is any other thing, I realized that India has the potential where if people focus, then they can find solutions. Because although I'm in this industry for last 30 years, I never thought people could produce such good materials so quickly. So in general, I would say the post-COVID, the credit goes that we are able to supply a sizable quantity. And when I say sizable, we increased our capacity almost 2.5 times post-COVID in the lockdown phase. When everything is shut down, we could able to increase 2.5 times more than our average production capacity pre-COVID. So the credit definitely goes to my employees and my teammates, but also to government, because they didn't stood out of the game and said that you manage and we are going to just ask you, but they were in our factory 24/7, supporting us, encouraging us, and taking care of many things that was possible for them. And then lastly, the supply team or the suppliers that we have in India. So I would say that was the reason that where we were successful in giving a large quantity of mask in the post-COVID time.
Wow, that's so nice. And if you could also share what are the dynamics of the N95 mask that you produce? How are you reaching out to the smaller segments, to the remote places of the country? What is your supply chain strategy put together? If you could also share that.
See, as I mentioned earlier, primarily we were export oriented and we were industrial oriented producer of respiratory devices. And suddenly we were trying to get into medical segment, but the medical segment was not very keen on going for a high protection mask, unlike the Western countries. And their protection levels were primarily basic, more restricted to 3-ply mask. So we all of a sudden on our hands had a new segment, the medical and healthcare segment, which was much bigger than the industrial safety segment that we were in. And we had to take a call sometime in this phase that do we supply to industrial safety or do we supply to medical and healthcare? And one answer we got was that if you don't supply to the industrial safety segment temporarily, then no one is going to get fatal. Okay. And in fact, most of the industries are under lockdown. But if we don't supply or dedicate our supplies towards medical healthcare, then we'll have more fatalities. And we would lose a lot of valuable resources like doctors and nurses and the COVID fighters. So we dedicated ourselves more to the COVID fight. When we decided to dedicate ourselves to COVID fight, we also realized this fight is done by government hospitals, everyone who is associated with government. So in the first phase, we dedicated all our supplies actually to the government. Even today, about 80% of our products are going to the government. And as the government kept on increasing hospitals or testing agencies for COVID detection or COVID cure, we started supplying only to those people the N95 mask. And the N95 mask is actually more effective. And today they say that 70 to 80% of the people who have used N95 mask will never get COVID, even if they're fighting in the COVID prone area. And that has been proven in several countries. So the special feature of this N95 mask is it allows you to filter submicron particles at very high percentage consistently. And at the same time makes it very easy for respiration. So one does not feel suffocated or one does not feel uncomfortable. So balancing both these criteria makes N95 a proven choice for majority of the people who are working in COVID-prone area. Your next question, actually in the same question, is that how are you going to reach smaller segments? I think in this situation of lockdown, where logistics is a challenge, qualifying who is a genuine user is a challenge. We are not getting into those smaller segments, or we are not getting into meeting the lowest or the individual user or the retail users, and we are just not trying to supply to those things because they are not the COVID fighters and they are not the priority case. Also, in this lockdown situation, we don't have that kind of resources that we can penetrate the whole marketplace. And that is done by the government agencies. They have a distribution channel in HLL, and HLL supplies to most government to the most state governments. The state government have their state medical supply divisions. And lastly, if there are major hospital chains like Apollo, Fortis, AIMS, we are supplying to them directly. In future, because we see that the COVID demand for N95 respirators will continue to be there for at least about 9 months to 15 months. So we think that in this post-lockdown, organizing the supply chain through organized distribution network will be a possibility, and we see that as an opportunity to make inroads in the medical healthcare sector, Priyanka.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kadav. I will get back to you with a few more questions, but now I move on to Mr. Ram. Dr. Ram, my question to you is, what are the different fabrics and composition of fabrics used to manufacture PPE suits, N95, disposable masks, so that it passes the international standards and be ready for exports?
Well, good afternoon, Priyanka, and thanks for inviting me for this webinar session. Before I get into fabrics particularly, I wanted to just give an overview, joining with what Dr. Rakshit said, that, you know, when we started this journey, and I'm going to restrict my speech more to coveralls, definitely the expert on N95, very deservedly so, after 30 years of hard work, is Mahesh. I would not say anything about N95 in his presence, but so also the fabrics, he's the expert on that. So I am going to stick to coveralls. Now, when it came to coveralls, the 0 to 4.5 lakhs free, you have to realize that what existed in this country at that point of time was already an infrastructure to create these fabrics. It was not that machinery was put in a very short time and things were done. That was not possible. The fabrics and the garmenting technologies required to create medical PPE coveralls existed in this country, and they were used for other things. And what happened in this crisis was that people converted many of their lines and rejigged and brought out a product that could satisfy the Indian needs. That was stage one. And I think we were broadly successful in stage one. Stage one was about meeting one simple standard called synthetic blood penetration testing as per ASTM. That's the American standard, ASTM 1670 or ISO 16603. Why is this not enough in going outside into the world and trying to supply to the rest of the world? Is that medical PPE are very exact, highly demanding, highly certification-oriented products, which takes practically years to get certification. Months don't really count. You're looking at, aside from quality management systems and certifications required for the factories, manufacturing factories, you're looking at not less than a dozen certifications for every single garment. And there is a standard for every single aspect. If you're looking at tear, you're looking at a certain. If you're looking at abrasion, you're looking at a particular standard. If you're looking at blood penetration or any other penetration, you're looking at a particular standard. So, in essence, there is a huge amount of standards, and the testing of these are essentially not available in India because this industry didn't exist in India to a large extent. I'm sure I'm also very interested in hearing from our other panelists who are in the QMS and the quality of the product space. So having said, this is the background. This is the background with which we've been operating. So there's been a great response from the Indian manufacturing on stage one, which was to create a synthetic blood penetration based product. And going to stage two is going to be a leap from here. It's not a few steps. It's going to be a leap from here. And I hope some of us make that leap. I'm sure there are people trying, but it's going to take a little bit of an effort. Now, coming to what, yes, please.
No, I was asking about the composition and fabrics, the different.
Yeah, I was giving this as a preamble before I come into fabrics.
Right.
So essentially, you're looking at two standards for medical garments in the world, two sets of standards that people generally follow. So you have the AAMI standards, which is mostly followed in the US, where you got a level 1 to level 4 kind of garments. Level 1 is limited liquid penetration, going all the way up in the levels of penetration, and they're all tested with water. And you go into AAMI level 4, which is the synthetic blood penetration test that has been mandated for India. It makes sure it's a very high level of a garment, but it's not completely there. To be completely there, you probably want to do ASTM 1671, which gives the viral penetration resistance results also for the fabric, right? So the synthetic blood penetration is a precursor to a viral penetration, which we are not mandating in India. And that is mandatory for a level 4 worldwide. And you also have the EN standards. Typically, we will be anywhere between 3, 4, 5, 6, probably 5, 6. Type 5 and type 6 are for limited liquid and dry particle penetration. So these are the standards that have to be achieved. And the fabrics that are used for doing this are essentially of 3, 4 types. First, we are looking at flash spun HDPE. That's a almost proprietary product of DuPont called Tyvek. Second, what's broadly used in the world is either a laminate, a microporous laminate, or you have an SMS or SMMS fabric of some sort. Let me first tell you about the microporous fabrics. Microporous laminates are actually fabrics where you have a non-woven layer, and on the top of which you have got a breathable or non-breathable film that is laminated. Normally, the film is a polyethylene film. You also have polyurethane films. Polyurethane films are not used in this industry because they're quite expensive. And they usually used in the sportswear and other industry. They perform the same as PE. In certain ways, they perform better than a polyethylene. But polyethylene is more cost effective, particularly for a single-use garment. So mostly they've got microporous PE, and the PE films can range from non-breathable to breathability. And when I talk breathability in a laminate, we are talking about moisture vapor transmission rates, MVTR, where there is in microporous, there is a direct pore level transmission of water vapor. In monolithic films, which are another type of film, you've got molecular transmission across the film. So in essence, what you have a barrier fabric, right? It's very simple. You have a very, very thin wall that doesn't allow anything to get through. That's probably the easiest, most logical way to stop something. But where it has a problem is that MVTR, even with reasonably high MVTR rates, the fabric is a little difficult to use or uncomfortable to use because it does not evaporate the sweat that fast. An alternate fabric to this, and the fabric that is broadly used in most medical situations, is called an SMS fabric. SMS is a spun bond, a type of non-woven, with something called as a melt-blown sandwich in between. Melt-blown is the magic material. Melt-blown is used in N95 masks or in other masks as well. It acts as a fine filtration medium. It doesn't have a strength by itself, so it is normally sandwiched between two spun bond layers, which give it the strength. So there are different formats. You have SMS, some manufacturers call it SM, MMS. By and large, these fabrics have got excellent viral penetration. They have got very good breathability. Their breathability is probably better than most laminates or almost all laminates, I would say. But where they fail is that their ability to have synthetic blood penetration resistance is suspect, in my personal view. People can take issue with that, but I don't think an SMS can take an ASTM level of penetration. Now, when you come to synthetic blood penetration, I have to mention that there are two standards. There's an ASTM standard, 1670, and there is a ISO standard, 16603, for synthetic blood penetration. The ASTM standard is a high standard. The ISO standard has got a categorization from 1 to 6, where level 3 itself passes. ASTM standard, for in simplistic terms, straight away goes to level 5 of a ISO 16603. So it's a difficult test to pass. So sometimes an SMS is on the borderline with regards to this test, but without any doubts, it is the mainstay for medical PPE coveralls, and in most situations it will be used, and it has more than adequate viral penetration, because the Meltblown would give you the same kind of viral penetration, submicron resistance, like what Mahesh said, as what an N95 would do. So SMS is used here. And the last fabric, there are certain types of simple spun-bond fabrics that can be used for level 1 and level 2 gowns. Level 1 and level 2 are limited water penetration gowns used in general medical situations, but definitely not in a COVID environment. So these are the ranges of fabrics. So within India, out of this 20 lakh meters of fabric you're hearing, you would have, I will say, almost equal amounts of the laminate fabric and at least a good amount of the non-woven fabric from 3 or 4 good manufacturers in this country. So we have both those two types. Tyvek, of course, being American, we don't have it in India, and it's from a single company. And Spunbond, of course, is available in plenty. So this is the broad fabric scenario in the medical coverall segment.
Thank you so much. That was quite intensive. What is the bottlenecks that you see to strengthen the supply and the distribution of these PPE coveralls in both domestic and international trade? And how would any manufacturer overcome this kind of a situation?
Right. So while we've gone to 4.5 lakh coveralls a day, at this point, like I said, for lack of certification, not for lack of capability, but for lack of certification and some amount of lack of understanding how the world is doing their garments, etc., etc., it is going to be a journey for us to go to exports. The first level activity that has to happen is that fabric manufacturers themselves, even the ones, and more than 100 have qualified in CITRA, even the ones who are there in the country right now need to really understand what the world wants. So what the world wants is could be very different from what the Indian government standard was. And manufacturers who are committed to actually being in this business in the long run will need to actually go vigorously for certifications right across the entire chain. It is not just one aspect of synthetic blood penetration. Like I mentioned, each aspect, like tensile, tear, seam strength, lint generation, each of these have got a specific test, and they're usually done not in this country. So the certification process for these fabric manufacturers is first, because it's only based upon that certified product that a garment manufacturer can tomorrow take his garment for his own certification process. It's going to take us a matter of months, in my opinion, to get there. There are certain European countries that have given temporary waivers for a lot of the certifications, including the quality certifications like CE, for products on an emergency use only in COVID environments. But that's going to be a short-lived exemption, in my opinion. So my Indian manufacturers need to gear up to understand what is MBTR. There are a lot of aspects. We have grown into this in 90 days. There are a lot of aspects to this. There are the nuances, rather, of manufacturing. Today, one of the challenges many people are having is in seam sealing tapes. And people are just now understanding that each tape behaves differently with each fabric. And so the way you would seam seal a polyurethane surface would be very different from what you would use for a PE surface and what you would use for, let's say, the non-woven surface. So these are nuances, and it's a growth curve. People will grow into it. It will take us time. The ones who are persistent and who will be there will get there eventually. The opportunity is there, not just for exports. Indian medical fraternity post-COVID is a different species. They now want the best of protection available. So there are great opportunities, and I'm sure our people will get there.
do you think there will be opportunity after COVID, like you just mentioned, or will the industry just come to a standstill? Will this continue?
No, no, absolutely. I mean, in my personal view, see, for example, as a manufacturer, I'm a laminator. I started laminating textile films in this thing with a special technology about 15 years back. I was probably the first one in the country to bring that kind of technology into this country. And for 15 years, I've not been in the medical PPE segment. I've been in related segments. We knew how to do this. Like I said, that's how we were able to respond fast. But we were not here. But today, seeing this opportunity, people like us are having, we would not go away from this business. We see an opportunity. I think COVID, it's a pre-COVID, post-COVID era. COVID has changed us for good. And people's attitudes are going to change for good. What used to be taken for granted or taken as not necessary, personal protection, especially in the medical area, is now taken at the very highest level. I have doctors talking to me, asking for what would save us, what to do that. And these are frontline personnel and they really feel the need to be protected and to be at peace on a daily basis. I think this business is here to stay, and we can look forward to many manufacturers actually doing significant changes in their system to be part of this.
Thank you, Dr. Ram. Thank you so much. I move on to Mr. Thapa. He heads the human protection division at Arvind. Mr. Thapa, tell me something. You're producing medical scrubs, doctor coats, clean room garments, suits, and protection for virus, woven and non-woven. And face masks are also exporting them. Would you be able to share product-wise the export demand scenario in the different regions of the world?
Good evening, Priyanka, and good evening, everybody. I would like to say, we are talking today about medical PPE. So I would like to appraise here, we are also doing PPE for the different segments other than medical, be it be oil and gas, be it be, electric arc protection, be it be automobile industry. So we have been supplying these PPE, especially the apparel side, globally. And I was talking to our partners across the globe, and they had a different feedback in the past about the size of the market. But now, post this COVID pandemic, they have started talking about there is a reasonable growth in the different geography. So first of all, I would like to share the information which I have with my partners from different regions, and then I'll go on product-wise. I was talking to our partner in North America, and they are sharing that this market is going to go, more than $4 billion US, and this is growing like anything. The CAGR they are expecting is 8 to 9% in the coming time. And same way, I was in touch with our partners in Europe, and they are also sharing that this market is going to go across Europe. It is going to be more than $1 billion US. And same way in Australia and New Zealand, if we talk about, they are sharing $350 to $400 million market is going to be there. And, different people are talking of different things now, because people could see this is not going to go away that soon. And this requirement is going to continue in the coming time. And if you look at the data shared by WHO, and I will read out what they have, shared the information product-wise. So in PPE, there is going to be masks, there is going to be suits or gown, you can call it as, there are going to be goggles, gloves, sanitizer. All these things are going to be in a PPE kit. If we look at the data which is shared by WHO, they are saying from July till December, in the next 6 months, they have given the data and they have given a comparative with the next year. So if you look at the data which they have given for the next 6 months, they are saying the masks are going to be, there is going to be a requirement of masks worth close to $535 million US. And this is going to grow in the next year by $640 million. And if you look at the suits, which we are talking about, which is talk of the town in India, now everybody is producing suits. And they are expecting this is going to be close to $1.8 billion US requirement in next 6 months. And it is going to be a same kind of requirement in the coming year. And same way in goggles, it's going to be $34 million US requirement this year. And it is going to go down because goggle is something which you can, reuse it continuously after sanitizing it. And if we talk about gloves, they're talking of around $1.8 billion US of gloves requirement is going to be there worldwide, and it is going to be same in the next year. And if we talk about sanitizer is going to be close to 125 million US dollar, and this is going to grow because it's going to double. Sanitizer is something which everybody is going to use in the coming time. So these are the data which they have shared, and they're also expecting this market, this industry is going to grow by 40% in the coming time. So there is a huge requirement here.
And when did Arvind enter the PP business, and what do you think are future plans of Arvind Limited in the sector?
See, as I shared, like we were in the PP, we haven't been in the PP for the last 10 years, but we're not into medical, to be honest with you. Medical, if we talk about, we started almost a year back, year and a half. So that was the time when we was manufacturing these scrubs, coats with different types of finishes, and we were making clean room garments and all. And that was the time when we initiated unveilment on this COVID-19 suit. You will be surprised to know that we got the suit certified from CITRA almost a year and a half back, and that was with the very high standards. And we dropped the idea. We never knew that this is going to be the problem in the coming time. Otherwise, we will continue, with the production of those suits at that time. So we did the development a year and a half back, and same way we started producing masks a year back. And this was some kind of arrangement with the third party, and we thought like it is something which we should be having in-house facility to produce this kind of masks and all. And again, we started these a year back almost. And when this situation arose, and then we had a little bit technical know-how in the past, and we encashed that, and we started producing the COVID-19 suits with the help of certain partners in the industry. So that means
Arvind's farsightedness actually helped in preparing themselves or preparing yourself for the
exactly. We had some kind of groundwork done almost a year back, and that helped us a lot in ramping up the kind of production which we did in the past couple of months.
Interesting. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Thapa.
Thank you very much.
I move on to Mr. Kapoor. Mr. Kapoor, you've been in the industry for over 40 years. What is the technology involved for construction of a classical PP suit? Can you please explain the methods and technology of the manufacturing of N95 and disposable masks?
Thanks, Priyanka, and thanks. Good evening, everybody. The classical method of producing a PP garment actually is pretty simple. It's only a 19 SAM garment. You need about 25 machines in a production line to produce about 500 pieces of PP suits. And, looking at the background of India and, that we are the 5th largest apparel producer in the world, this making of the garment itself, like what Ram and others have been saying, is nothing really very special, in the sense that, it requires simple single needle machines and overlock machines. And now a new seam sealing machine has come into the picture, which actually closes and seals all the seams. So the production itself is not really a very big deal, when it comes to making a PP suit. The real challenges come, in my opinion, is when you start looking at the standards that, the healthcare industry really wants. See, that's where, when it comes to the kind of tapes we use, depending on how the tapes perform in that particular fabric and how the seam sealing operation itself can cater to these kind of nuances, is really the trick of this whole trade. And that's where I think that, a lot of people, have tried to jump into the business thinking that it's a very good opportunity, which it is. There's no question about it. But I think over time, when people realize that the challenges and the standards which have been set out, are more defining. And, these are situations where, you're really dealing with people's lives. After a healthcare worker really is taking for granted that the product that you've made, will protect him. So I think it's extremely important for us, to have that sense that while the garment itself can be made very simply, its application and its how important it is for lives, is really the key factor here. I think the same thing also goes with masks. Today masks, if you look at masks, a simple disposable mask or an N95, what is happening is that the fabrics which actually go, the 3-plies which actually go into making these masks, plus the ventilators and this, all that respirators and all that kind of stuff, which bring into the technicality of how you make it in the perfect way. Now, fortunately, in the production of masks, it's a pretty automatic process. Unlike PPE suits, in PPE suits, you need a production line. But in mask making, most of the mask making machines are automated units. And these automated units produce 50 pieces a minute, 60 pieces a minute. So they are high production machines. And once you have the right kind of fabrics and you have the right kind of, you settle on the process of that particular item, it becomes pretty simple. But I must say that at this stage, the whole subject has become extremely interesting, because what we see today is that, I'm sure a lot of you people read, and see what that masks have become a fashion statement. So we are actually looking at PPE suits, which is today we conceive of PPE suits as something which we're using in the healthcare industry. But you can imagine that tomorrow, you and me will actually own a PPE suit that every time we go to we take a flight or, we go to a crowded place, you'd probably take one, you'd probably have your own PPE suit, for these kind of places. So I think the demand is going to explode. And same thing goes with masks. If you look at masks, the designer masks which are being created, people are getting very innovative in matching those masks, the kind of garments that they wear and stuff like that. And as long as we keep our eye on the ball, that, this is not just a fashion piece of, apparel, and this is also, something which saves lives, we'd be okay. I'm going to give you a small example. My Japanese friends, since IAGM deals with a lot with Japanese companies, my Japanese friends tell me that in Japan, wearing a mask has been around for the last 30 years. He says, every time I catch a cold, I wear a mask. It didn't really matter. But of course, now that you have COVID and, it's, people are talking about this being a regulation and, you need to, wherever you need to wear a mask. But he says, this has become a way of life in Japan for many, many years. And that's why he says, we've always, kept hygiene and always kept, these kind of levels at the foremost of our, because we're not worried so much about ourselves, we're more worried about others. And I think, as long as you look at those kind of scenarios, you will find that, these products are going to stay, and they're going to stay there for a long time to come. Yeah. But again, for the garment industry in India, we have more than 400-500 companies, as Ram was saying, who are already making PPE suits. And a lot of our customers have got into this business. And I thought I'd just share a small little video of one critical operation of the PPE suit, which I think is which really needs to be understood well, because this is the key factor in ensuring that the PPE or the seam sealing is done in a proper way. So I'll just share that video.
Yeah, please.
That's me. You have to give me a minute.
Yeah, no problem.
Basically, it is sealing tape, which is actually applying the tape, the heat seal tape, on all the sleeves of the garment.
As you can see, the configuration of the seam sealing machine should be able to cover all sewn seams with a seam sealing tape. This application is done by fusing the heat sealing tape on the seam of the garment. In this video, the process shown is on spun bonded laminated fabric around 70 GSM. The heat seam sealing tape is a PE plus EVA coated tape around 20 mm in width.
So right, that was a small video. Basically gives you a little idea of, what a seam sealing machine does. The interesting part is that, seams, I was talking to our friend from Ireland was telling us that today seam sealing has a variety of applications. It's not only PPE that we're talking about. PPE, yes, is one of them. But we also have fire protection suits. We have rainwear. We have today a lot of undergarments, which are using seams, seam sealing and not sewing as a process. And we have performance wear. If you see a lot of performance wear today has no sewing in it, is all done through seam sealing. Industrial workwear, which we're using in hazardous areas, like mining and, so on and so forth. A lot of these garments now, non-apparel garments actually, or non-apparel products are using, heat seam sealing tapes. So there's, I think, while there is a certain amount of investment in these kind of products, there are also diverse and varied applications that we can use for especially newcomers who are in this business.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kapoor. I want to move on to the technical part of it and would like to welcome Mr. Kundra here. My first question to you is the industry and many manufacturers are seeking for some serious guidance. There is no single or universal guideline that can be followed worldwide and thus creating a lot of confusion in the industry. Can you please, with your knowledge, lay a simple guideline or tell us the steps to follow? Also, if you could also elaborate the different testings done for the EU, US, and other regions of the world. Mr. Kundra? Yeah, you're on mute. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, Mr. Kundra, you can go ahead.
Thanks. Okay. Yes, you are correct. There is a lot of standards floating, lot of misnomenclature going around. So we have also evolved. Just to give you an example, with my Italy team, we are already a notified body for the EN 149, which we call as N95 masks. But before COVID-19, we hardly had requests for people coming for the CE marking for the face mask. Or the filtering piece half masks. So there is a lot of misnomenclature going on. So I would like to first go in sequence with what are the different nomenclatures being used, and then come to the standards required for the same. There is something called as a hygiene mask, where we are using for the cloth face covering, which is generally a non-regulated market. So it is for some countries have regulated after the coronavirus outbreak, but they don't guarantee any protection against infectious agents. They only act as a barrier. As Mohan Kapoor ji said, that it is more to not only to save yourself, but also to save others also. So then comes the surgical or the medical mask category, where majority of the audience is talking about. This is basically to cover your mouth and nose and provide a barrier so that there is no direct transmission of infective agents from the wearer to the person close to it. This is not a PPE. This is considered as the medical devices, the surgical and medical masks. The personal protective equipments, when we go to it, are actually half mask respirators, which Venus was talking about. This is exactly what we are talking about in the FFP 1, 2, 3 levels of respirators. They're actually filtering face piece masks. So they are designed to protect the wearer against inhalation of any potential harmful droplets and particles suspended in the air. In the healthcare environment also, they protect against airborne spread pathogens or infectious agents. So they are actually the personal protective equipment. And there is a nomenclature which goes on in here in terms of FFP 1, 2, or 3. So it is categorized basically on their filter efficiency as well as on their leakage. So if I clearly advise on the difference between the FFP 1, 2, or 3. So for the FFP1, the filter is about 80% and the leakage is less than 22%. And similarly for the what we call as FFP2 or N95 mask, the filtration is to the level of greater than 94%, at least 94%, and the leakage, inward leakage, is to the tune of less than 8%. Also, these and the FFP3, which we talk of N100, which filters at least 99% of the airborne particles, and the inward leakage is less than 2%. There are different organizations which you would see that they also have a band to it to hold, and they are also sometimes categorized with the color of the bands also. That yellow is generally for FFP1, blue or white is for FFP2 or N95, and FFP3 is generally for the color of the staff is used as the red. So generally we talk of N95 in our domain in this industry when we are talking of viruses and the other pathogens and infectious agents. And N100 is generally when we use N100 is generally used when we are talking of an area where we work on the asbestos or ceramics, so not in the healthcare. So this is actually a personal protective equipment. Then there is a surgical N95 respirator, which is called as a dual mask. So these masks also provide protection against the bioaerosols to the wearer, and also at the same time reduce the transmission of the infectious agent working in the area. So they should both comply with the legislative provisions of the personal protective equipment and the medical product requirements also. So if I categorize them, what we generally use is hygiene masks, surgical medical masks, which are medical devices, not the PP. The PP actually in the mask categories are the half mask respirators, and they are called half masks primarily because they only cover the half of your face, chin, nose, and mouth. So that is why they are called as half mask respirators.
On the testing standards, if you could tell categorically for EU, USA, and other regions.
Yes. If I go to the 14683 category, so there are generally, we look at 3 types of testings. One is the barrier testing, for where we are talking of the bacterial filtration efficiency, as well as the synthetic blood penetration in the same. Synthetic blood penetration is actually required in the type 2 reusable or class 3. And then there is a physical testing in terms of the differential. Some people call it as differential, or some people call it as a breathability test. And then we talk of the safety testing in the same, which is the microbial cleanliness when we talk of in terms of the surgical masks. Also, there is a test on the safety, which is on the biocompatibility part of it, which is as per the ISO 10993 guidelines, where we are talking of the various tests with respect to cytotoxicity or the skin irritation with respect to, which is tested on a guinea pig, or with respect to the rabbits as per 10993, 1 and 5 and 10 series. So currently, this is exempted from the temporary exemptions. It is exempted from the CE marking currently. If I take the same with respect to the US standard for the surgical or the medical masks, then we are looking at the ASTM F2190. This is the test applicable for the US market. So here again, the fundamental test is bacterial filtration efficiency, but another test which comes, which is important in the barrier testing perspective, is the particle filtration efficiency test, where the standard required is ASTM F2299. For the level 1 of the masks, as was saying, is 95%, but level 2 and 3 is greater than 98%, and we are here talking of the particle filtration efficiency. Then we are the same conditions more or less remain the same for the tests of ASTM F2100. The only additional requirement here on the safety side from EN 14683 is the flammability test, which is done as per the 16 CFR part 1610. And that is the only difference between the EN standard 14683 for the Europe as well as ASTM 21019 for the same. If I now...
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So if I now go to very practically on the...
Yeah, sorry.
So here now we are now talking of the tests which are there in terms of the gowns or coveralls, what we call as gowns or drapes, where we are talking of the standard with respect to the EU norms or the Europe as EN 13795, as well as the standard for the US is ASTM F2407. So these are the two different standards which are being used for the medical gowns or drapes. And the main tests, I think earlier Mr. Ram also was talking of this. Here we get into the tests which are on the barrier performance, which is actually looking at your impact penetration on the water, what we said, and the hydrostatic resistance, which is as per AAPC 42 and AAPC 127. And we are also looking at the viral penetration test here, which we are talking of the barrier performance as per AAMI PB70. There are other tests which are based on different ASTMs related to physical properties, their tensile strengths, their tear strength, their triad strengths for woven and non-woven, their seam strength, their lint generation, their evaporative resistance or the water vapor transmission rates. So different ASTM standards are applicable in here, but these are all the tests which are applicable. The microbial penetration, we are looking at two tests in microbial penetration in here. One is a dry microbial penetration and the other is the wet microbial penetration, which are referenced to the EN ISO standards of 22610 and 22612. In terms of the same, when we are looking at the standard applicable to EU in terms of BSEN 13795, here also, apart from all the other tests, we are also looking at the tests with respect to the biocompatibility, which is applicable to both. But here we are talking of 10993 10, which is resistive skin irritation test with respect to the review of the animals in terms of guinea pig and the rabbit. So these are prime tests for both the surgical or medical masks as well as the gowns and drapes, or you call them as coveralls in that capacity. So if you're looking at these tests, so these are the tests which are applicable.
Thank you so much. Well, all the tests for PP are somewhere related to medical terminology, like you just mentioned, and hence, it appears a little clumsy to a lot of manufacturers. what are the requirement parameters, if you can say in simple language, and also elaborate the classification of C-class parameters?
When we are looking at C marking, so C marking is generally for Europe. So when we are, so I would also like to clear on the certification piece in terms of US as well as the Europe. Europe, you need a C marking, and that has to be done by a notified body, or we call as the NANDOS, and they are generally applicable for the class 3. So EN 149 falls under the class 3 category of medical devices, so, or these personal protective equipment. So that is why it needs a notified body to do the complete process of C marking. The same N95, when we are looking at the E95 with respect to the US market, we are looking at the FDA FDA piece of it, where FDA 21 or CFR 878 is applicable, and it gets categorized under class 2. And the pre-market notification of this comes under the submission, something which is called as 510K. And you need to be a NIOSH lab, to accredited lab, to go and work on the NIOSH standard certification of the equivalent of EN 149 as N95. There are certain tests where the general requirements for the test generally remains the same for EN 149 as well as the N95 NIOSH, but there are few, the general tests remain the same, but the final outcome or the criteria for clearance are a little different. Even the micron, when we are checking on the particle filtration efficiency or the penetration of filter material, you would find when you are doing for EN 149, you are looking at the penetration of filter material with respect to NaCl as well as paraffin oil as well when you are talking of EN 149. But when you are looking at the market in US in NIOSH, it doesn't talk of the paraffin oil filtration, it only talks of the NaCl. And also when we are talking of the penetration of the filter material, the microns levels, you can well imagine the when we were saying whether we are ready, export ready, here the penetration level of the micron levels of the aerosol generator, which generates the salt and what the aqueous salt or NaCl aerosols, is to the level of 0.06 micron to 0.1 micron. And in case of US, it is 0.3 micron. So we are really talking of something which currently, in the current practices, we would find a lot of effort going into actually clearing on these tests. And also one of the other important category of tests is we are also looking at the CO2 content of the inhalation of air in terms of EN 149 and US FDA NIOSH. So the process goes is when you are actually going for class 3, so you have to go through the 3 processes. So you need to go through a preparation of your own technical file, which is given in the one of the annexes when we go to the PP modules of EU. So when you will go to the particular directive of the EU, which is 2016-425 for the personal protective equipment. So you would, since you fall under class 3, first and foremost is identify a particular nominated lab by a notified body, get your product tested. Make a technical file. This technical file consists of 9 different items. And some people on the medical device industry, it may look as a different jargons which I am speaking, but let me tell you, it is as easy as ABC. It is not written in any different language than English. So there are 9 requirements. A technical file means I need to create the product portfolio, then go about the product details, the specifications, what is the intended use, what is the bill of material, how it would be used, all that into the technical file. Then the technical file goes for the submission along with the test reports to notified body. There is an on-site audit which is done apart from the technical file submission. So there is an audit done on the on-site to verify the compliance of the processes also of the manufacturing in terms of EN 149 or N95 NIOSH. Once this is also verified, then you are issued a CE marking, which is applicable for 3 years. And within that time, the notified body also selects that at what frequency and what sampling they will come again and pick up these samples in random from the production process. One is the samples which you submit, and the other is when at a regular frequency, the notified body sends their own people to pick up the samples from randomly from the production process, and then they are again tested to cross-verify on the same. So this is a general process for CE marking. Class 3 is done by the notified body following all 3. Class 1 is self-certification. Class 2A is also self-certification, but under class 2B, you actually go and submit a technical file along with this to a notified body, and it gives you based on your test results. So that is the key difference. So most of the items in PPE, except for EN 149, should get covered in the self-certification or your own technical files based on our notified lab, which is approved by the notified body, where you get your product tested in short.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kundra. That was very, very insightful. On the same lines, I will also include Mr. Mukherjee here. Mr. Mukherjee, can we see you?
Yeah.
Yeah, we would like, yeah, you very much. Should we, on the same lines, please share with our audience your experience and knowledge, the key requirements of PPC certification for use by medical and healthcare personnel, which is a key in today's, to export these products from India now.
Sure. Thank you, Priyanka. Thanks for this opportunity. And I think for TÜVSÜD, it has been a very exciting journey since last 3 months. We have learned a lot. And we have started developing a lot of capabilities, including the test capabilities. Then we understood the certification processes. And then overall, from 2 business divisions, one is consumer product service, which is essentially the soft line testing lab, and the medical health and safety business line, MHS. We are jointly catering to, the need of the industry. And by far, I think we are kind of, catering to a part of the entire industry, which is growing in India. I mean, it's awesome to, kind of hear everybody in this webinar. So let's kind of start talking about this CE certification things. So if you talk about PPE, I think if you talk about the COVID-19 scenario, we can see few PPE categories in market. One is the mask, then the gowns, for example, or coverall, shoe covers, face shields, right? So these are technically called PPE, and then there are different categories. N95 is technically is a respirator, but yes, there is a hybrid category wherein people call it N95 respirator with surgical attributes, which also kind of comes under PPE. So that's a little debatable anyway. So if you talk about the categories of PPE, let's talk about mask and gowns, which are actually, pretty much talked by the industry these days. So essentially, there are 2 categories, one which used for the medical purpose, second one which is not used for the medical purpose. So something which is used for the medical purpose, it has to be sterile. And something which is not used for the medical purpose, it's a non-sterile mask or gown. The non-sterile mask is something which is either a 3 or 5 ply non-woven mask, which you actually get to buy in, all this normal medicine shops. People who wear all this 3 ply non-woven masks are actually the non-sterile masks. Sterile is something which is actually used in the medical environment, let's say in operation theater, or let's say in ICU, as an example. So typically these are class 1 products, and then the sterile products are class 1S. So they have to comply. If you talk about European market, they have to comply EU MDR, I mean European Medical Device Regulation 2017/745. And if you talk about US, obviously it has to go for FDA registration, and N95, as you all know, it has to go for NIOSH. N95 hybrid, which is surgical as well as respirator, has to go for both FDA and NIOSH. So let's talk about the mask and gowns, for example. So typically all these masks and gowns are having different categories. So mostly we get to see category 1 or class 1 products. Out of that there could be 2 categories. One is non-sterile and which is sterile, which is class 1S. For class 1S, you have to go for a notified body to get a C certification. Class 1, which is non-sterile, there can be a self-certifications. So that is the difference. So there could be different risk levels. Say, for example, in a gown or a mask, which is a class 1 PPE, it could actually be used for different risk levels, level 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 is a minimum risk and 4 is a high risk in terms of, the exposure in the medical environment. For example, typically in an ICU or in a pathology lab, the level 2 is most important. Level 4 is very high risk, with some, very infectious diseases, or let's say where there is a chance of, a fluid transfer. So in those cases, level 4 is being used. So now coming to the C certification process, I remember what Dr. Rakshit told at the beginning. He was the first speaker in our webinar, and he told about ISO 13485. Yes, that is the mandatory requirement. This is the precursor. So we have to go for ISO 13485 in order to be qualified for exporting PPEs to Europe. And there are a few things. One, the manufacturing unit should go for this QMS, this quality management system, as per ISO 13485 2016 guidelines and standards, if you want to export to Europe. The QMS manual and guidelines has to be prepared before the audits, which is necessary. For C certification of sterile PPEs, let's say the surgical mask, you should actually have a clean room in your factory, which is very important. I mean, one should not really neglect that part. In spite of the fact that there are a lot of fake products are in the market, so one should understand the importance of clean room. Without clean room, somebody cannot produce the surgical sterile mask or PPEs. And apart from the clean room, the sterilization validation reports has to be available before the audit. So these are the precursor for the audit. So these are very important for CE marking. And as I said that for class 1S, yes, like other agencies, TÜV, we are a German MNC, we are also a notified body. Our notified body number is 0123. So for example, if somebody is working with us to get a C certification for class 1S sterile PPE, they can affix the notified body number 0123 with the product. So that's how it goes.
Well, thank you so much,
yeah.
Subhadeep. I would like to pull in Dr. Rakshit here, while you just mentioned. Dr. Rakshit, what do you think are the bottlenecks of these testing parameters for both domestic and international trade? Dr. Rakshit, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Okay. Yeah. Now, you see what I mentioned in the beginning, that we have actually rose from 1 laboratory to 8 laboratories. Correct? I just mentioned. Now that was from Citra, and we incorporated these DRDO and also these ordnance factory labs. Now, these are the basic requirement is that, as you have heard earlier speakers, that you need to really do your own homework to develop your product and test it. For example, these tests today, what is happening, bottleneck number 1. Today, we are only testing the blood penetration test, not any other test which are required in class 3 type of categories. Now these level, even then, today there is a variation of pressure as you do ASTM that 770 to 170 and also ISO 16603. These two pressure levels are also different. One is around 3.87, another is around 14 kPa. Now, this is also the variation available in our country with this different lab. That is why you find somebody's fabric is passing in one lab, another lab it is failing, because this is the problem. Now, first of all, we need to have more number of laboratories in India, which should be accessible to our industry entrepreneurs who are trying to develop these products, whether you call it as PPE fabric, or you call it or PPE fabric, PPE coverall, and also different types of masks. Now, to some extent, PPE coverall and fabric testing, we are having facilities, but there is very, very limited facilities of testing these N95, N99, or various types of masks in India. Because there is these testing instruments are extremely expensive. So even in our MSE level of the manufacturers in India, those who are in the fabric manufacturing or the mask manufacturing, they cannot afford to have their own in-house laboratory, investing something like, it is nothing less than 2 crores of rupees. Only this filtration efficiency TS instrument comes about 1 crore, and all other instruments together, I would guess that it will nothing less than 2 crores. Plus, he has to have the clean room, you have to have the laboratory with AC and all that, which our industry is not. So it is necessary that there are some common testing facilities available in the country and in the vicinity at the various location of the country. This is a big constraint today for the development of the product, because for developing the product, you need to have number of trials, you need to do a lot of testing, and these testing, if one testing costs you something like 10, 15,000, 20,000 rupees, it is not possible for them to develop the product. It is not that the capability is not available, as Dr. Ram has pointed out. Today, even for the export purposes, this breathability is one of the aspects. Other aspects are about antimicrobial, antiviral. There are so many other tests are required. Now, these tests have to be done on the sample before going to any certification or going to any buyer, for example. You need to know all this. So these are the constraints we have about the testing facilities in India.
Oh, thank you so much. Exactly at this point, I want to include one of our attendee, Mr. Mohan Kavri, and he has a question to all of you all. So he will be joining us in a second now. Mr. Kavri, we are not able to, can you hear us? Please unmute yourself. We cannot see you, Mr. Kavri.
Just now I had come.
Yes. If you could just take it a little higher so that we can see your face.
Is it better now?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay, but I cannot see myself. What do I do? You are able to see me?
Yes, we are also able to hear you well. Please go ahead.
It doesn't matter. So thank you, Priyanka, for giving me the chance to speak. I must start by thanking Dr. Rakshit, because he really set the tone correctly. His one word no, I think, was very, very important for this entire session. This session, if I may say so, has been prompted by the hype of the quantity that we are making. But we are talking of a highly sophisticated product which has to meet very stringent performance characteristics. Barring a couple of manufacturers, what we have really demonstrated in these 2 months is our garmenting capabilities. We must please understand that there is a world of a difference between garmenting and producing the right PPE product. I have been in the nonwoven industry for over 40 years, and practically all the materials that go into the making of PPE products are mostly based on nonwovens with various kinds of finishes, composites, but essentially nonwovens. So what is important is really the materials that you start with. No matter what anybody says, we did not have all the right materials to start with. And even today, we don't have the right materials to a great extent, except for the few discerning people who are using the right materials. It is primarily what Dr. Rakshit said at the beginning is, we have compromised on the standards in order to meet the volumes. Today's heading is whether we are ready for exports. No, there cannot be any compromises if we are to export. And we are miles away from reaching that level. Let us not fool ourselves that we are ready for the world. It has taken Mahesh around 30 years to reach where he is, please. How many can claim that they have this many decades of experience? So, honestly, unless we understand that this is a sophisticated technical product with very high performance demands, we will succeed in supplying to the local market. But even there, our doctors are suffering. They are protected. But honestly, the kind of protection that they are being given, I think a plastic raincoat also can give. So please, even starting this moment, let us try to give products which are performing, and not just any product, even if standards have been lowered for whatever reason. As manufacturers, we must be more responsible and give products which will meet requirement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kavri. I think we're running out of time. There are a lot of, I think, more than 100 questions that are pouring in for each of the panelists. What we will do is we are requesting all the attendees to please note down. I will give you my email address or from the office. Please share it out to us and we will forward it to all the attendees here, and maybe they could address it one-on-one and take it forward from there. What do you say? Is there, from the last concluding remarks, may I request all of you all to say something in short, and the future of the medical protective wear from India and what should we do together? Dr. Rakshit, can we start with you? You're on mute. You're on mute, sir. Sir, again on mute. Yes, sir. Now you.
Is okay?
Yeah.
Now, I just want to, because it had come to a situation that as if our industry is not doing anything. So I just want to convey the encouraging words to my friends in the industry. You see, nothing has gone wrong, and we have to make efforts to actually develop, and we have to have the quality. That's all. If we are able to get this quality perfect, and also understand the standards of the exports, and then with the various buyers and various certifications, various management, quality management systems, these are the things are required. We may take little more time, because I know about 15 or 20 companies have already developed these breathable films, but that is not enough. If we have at least 40-50 fabric manufacturers, this will multiply to something like another 400 or 300-400 garment manufacturers. So once it is done, then we are ready for the exports. It may take little time, but the efforts have to be taken by the industry to achieve these standards and all these systems. That is my concluding
Thank
remark.
you so much, Mr. Rakshit. Mr. Kodab, can we have you?
Yes, thank you, Priyanka. First of all, thank you, Mr. Kawri, and thank you for other panelists. At the outset, on a concluding note, I would like to say that we have to look at the risk and opportunity as we go further from here. One of the risks that I am realizing is people are worried about the COVID and how it is going to affect their operations and their companies. And we have been working last 3.5 months without a break. Fortunately, we don't have any COVID case within us or within our suppliers. And I would say that the primary reason is three. First thing is creating awareness among our employees. What can happen if what is done as regards sanitation, as regards personal hygiene, and most important, nourishment. Taking care of people's nourishment who are working for you, giving them the right nutrition. This is what we did. Sanitation of all incoming material, all equipments, all buses, all transport vehicles, not overdo it, because I have seen in some places people spraying the entire vehicle while coming in. And I don't think that we did ever in the last 3 months. But definitely we did some cooling period for all incoming material, particularly paper. We realized that paper is a very important carrier. So I would say to all my colleagues that look at the risk of what can be a carrier when anything is coming inside. Don't get worried about saying that your operations now have to not resume. Definitely do that. Definitely use PP as appropriate. Don't use N95 mask for every workman or every employee in your office. You don't really require an N95 mask for anyone working. So these are one of the things I would say the risk to look at. The opportunity that I see is that definitely the world is looking forward to India to meet its global requirement. And we can be a big exporter. What took me 30 years didn't take for my other fellow entrepreneurs that many years. I assure you, you can do it much quicker. I personally have experienced the way my suppliers or all those who have supplied me raw material, how quickly they have adopted to the adversity and the challenges of providing me superior materials. So I think taking this as an adversity and taking it as an opportunity and working to achieve global standards with a systematic approach, like Dr. Rakshit said, should be a realistic part. But at all the time, we have to realize what Mr. Kawri said, it is not a cakewalk. Don't expect yourself to say that, okay, I'm just going to do it and I'm going to have it next day. Nothing works that way. So a remark of caution that opportunity is there, but be aware that it's not an easy path. Have a systematic approach, but it's not going to take you 30 years like it did for me. Maybe I was dumb enough for that. You may take just few months, 6 months or shorter time than me. That's all I have as a concluding remark.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kodab. Dr. Ram, can we have your concluding remarks?
Yeah. First of all, it's been a pleasure being here, and thanks to my fellow panelists and to you, Priyanka, for getting me here. And I would just very briefly say that I think what Mr. Kawri said was very apt. It's not going to be a joyride. Few of us will get there. We have the competencies, and it's a journey. We'll definitely get there. It's not going to be easy. So every time somebody comes and tells us don't get too euphoric, it's very important. And it's very important for our general well-being and the fact that we'll all get there over a point of time. So the opportunity is there. Indian industry is capable, but it's going to take some time to get there if we all work in a very systematic manner. Certification is not new to us. In many industries, particularly protective textiles, even in garmenting industry to a certain extent. And QMS is also not new to us in the textile manufacturing industry, even if you're not in technical textiles. So the basic ingredients are there. We just need to understand the special needs of this industry and the kind of effort that it will take to get over there. And I'm very confident Indian industry would really be a force to reckon with over a period of time in the PPE industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ram. Thank you so much. Mr. Thapa, can we have your concluding remarks?
Yes, thank you, Priyanka, and thank you all the panel members. I think Professor Kabre has said he has very rightly put it straightway, like, we don't know what are the standards and what we are supplying. But at the same time, like we need to know who's going to differentiate who's right and who's wrong. I think that is the point which I would like to raise here. Like there should be some body, be it be a government body or it's going to be for private industry. They should come forward and have you set up a lab who should decide what is right and what is wrong. I think that is what we are missing in India. I think, that is creating that kind of confusion between right people and wrong manufacturer and the right manufacturers. I think that is something which I would like to share from my side.
So you mean the key, I think what I've heard is the key is cooperation. I think the whole industry has to come together and work.
Of course, the industry need to come forward in collaboration with the government bodies, set up a lab who should set up the standards, like what, if we are talking about PP, and what are the standards. One lab is testing, I'm not going to name any lab. One lab is testing under 11 Pascal pressure, and another lab is testing same fabric under 3 Pascal pressure. So both the fabrics are qualifying and both the products are qualified and people are supplying left and right. But when it comes to performance, both the products are going to perform differently. So who's going to differentiate that? So the person who is supplying the right product is also wrong, and the person who is supplying the wrong product is also wrong. So I think there should be somebody who should differentiate all this, what is right and what is wrong.
Thank you so much. Mr. Kapoor, can we have your insights and
I think this was a very informative webinar. In just 2 months, I think so much of knowledge has really passed on, to all your viewers and to all of us. I am a firm believer that there is an opportunity in every crisis. And in any business, the most important thing is demand. And, here we have demand staring at us in the face. So what Mahesh says that, he took 30 years to do something, what he did. But I believe Indians are clever. I believe our industry is geared for, doing international business. I have seen, cities like Tirupur absolutely dying after a Supreme Court order declared that, they had problems with, all their leakages and whatever it is, but they came back so strong. So I believe that, we have a great opportunity here because there is a huge demand in the world market, and there are very few players in the whole world who can seize this opportunity. And here we are at the cusp of that, opportunity. So I think, and I'm very hopeful that our industry will, come up, to really take up this challenge, and we will get there.
I'm sure I think we're going to all bounce back very soon.
Absolutely. And the garment industry today is going through a big problem with so many cancellations and this and that. And this has been a godsend of an opportunity.
Yeah.
1,000 crores in 2 months is something to talk about. So, let's look at the positives. Of course, we have to also consider that, there are going to be challenges. There's no business which comes to you, on your lap. There are obviously part of the challenges, some of them very severe. But, I think our industry is very mature. Our garment industry is mature. Our textile, companies are now solid. And we are international players. So, we should be able to do it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kapoor. Mr. Kundra, can we have your concluding words?
Yes.
And it's my personal request to keep it very simple because, the earlier description was so intense that the crowd may just get scared of it. So please tell them that testing is not so bad.
Our motto at Eurofins is testing for life. So when we test to save lives of people. Eurofins as an organization is leaders in pharma, food, health, as well as the agro sciences. So that is primarily what we do. So testing is good. The more we test, the better. So that is one part. Apart from that, I think I'm lucky that I have been in these two eras where first I worked with the automotive industry when industry was opened after economic liberalization in 91, 92. So the standards came to automotive industry. We were enforced into global competition. I'm drawing an analogy here. I was involved at that time also. From a 10 to 12% rejection levels at that time, now the automotive industry works as less than 100 ppm of rejection, which is probably 0.0001%. So by nature, Indians are entrepreneurs. They know how to innovate. They know how to multi-skill and multi-tool. So I'm very, very confident on the same. And I believe with respect to some areas where people were saying that somebody is using 3 kPa and somebody is using 14 kPa, I believe that is where standards make a difference. Because this journey of automotive industry was also defined by the implementation of management systems and the best tools from Lean Six Sigma and all that stuff. So people have reached here. So yes, there have to be standards, and standards define how we work. So everybody is uniform in that standard. So it's a combination of two journeys now. One is, of course, the manufacturing innovation. The other is the standardization of what we do in the uniformity, repeatability and reproducibility, what we call it, and the implementation of the management system standards and the testing methodologies so that we produce good, because here we are testing for life of people. These are personal protective equipments. We cannot go wrong with them in long run. And we are here to help as a global organization to make sure that we support in whatever ways Indian industry we could. And it is a privilege to be in this session, and also a privilege that I work in an organization which would support the Testing for Life initiative and make sure that we are safe at the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Kundra. And Subhadeep, can we have your concluding remarks?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think from 0 to world number 2 in 3 months, so it says the story, right? Because it says that India as a country has a huge potential. I mean, during the COVID crisis, thankful to the comment made by Mr. Kapoor, I completely agree with you. It's a God-gifted opportunity. It's a lifeline given to the Indian fraternity of manufacturers and exporters. From my side, what I would say that, you know, being in the testing and compliance fraternity since more than a decade, I think it's all about collaboration. I think we should collaborate with each other, the industry, the testing labs. You know, we are not separate from each other, right? So we are same. So it needs a lot of awareness. It needs a lot of dialogues and discussions. And through that only we can be number one. So with that, I'll just end. Thank you so much, Priyanka, and thank you everyone, the great panelists.
Thank you so much, Subhadeep. But I'm going to keep the last words for Mr. Kavri because they're always very, very helpful to the industry. Sir, some concluding remarks from you too.
Well, what I said was not to discourage anybody. Because I don't know anybody who's as positive as I am as far as my country is concerned. So we are the most capable people, but what we must respect is systems, the need for quality. So my message is only that the word I use may not be liked by some people. To a great extent, what we have achieved in this 2 months is jugaad. Jugaad cannot sustain us in the long term. It is systems, quality, and of course, as far as testing is concerned, please, if you are to be a world player, you must have certain basic testing facilities within house. You can't do R&D really if you are not able to test every day to ensure that you are maintaining the quality, and every couple of days to check what you are developing. So for anybody who wants to be a real global player, investing in testing facilities is very, very important. So all the best. I'm sure that we will become an exporting nation because we have started that journey. Now we have to only, strengthen ourselves on this journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, all panelists. On behalf of Messe Frankfurt, I thank all of you all to spend this time and to encourage the audience, to encourage newcomers, new entrepreneurs to get on this journey for manufacturing for domestic demand and also for exports. Thank you. Thank you so much for sparing your time.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
Priyanka, on behalf of ITA, I want to thank all the participants and all the panelists also.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you so much. And stay safe, and we see each other very soon now.
Okay.
Absolutely. Stay safe. Take care.
Yes. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.